Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Exceptional Stories and the People Who Live Them. This is a faith-based, in-depth conversation-style podcast with and for parents of special needs children. Each episode will feature parents of special needs kids who are making a difference. Every day, these superstar parents tackle the ups and downs of life. This podcast will let you have a front row seat to hear how they do it, why they do it, and what you can learn from their experiences as they share their exceptional stories. Let's get started. We interrupt this podcast to bring you this special news bulletin. Did you know that for as little as $3 a month, you can be an active supporter of this podcast? Go to the show's website at www.exceptionalstoriespodcast.com and click the support button on the home screen. That website again is www.exceptionalstoriespodcast.com. Click the support button on the home screen and enter your support today. We will now join the podcast already in progress. Well, welcome into the very first podcast of Exceptional Stories and the People Who Live Them. And I couldn't think of any better way to do this than to lay the foundation of why special needs kids and special needs parents are important to me and to my family. And to do that, I have asked my wife to join me on this very first episode. And this is the first time she's ever been on a podcast. So we're going to work through the nerves and get through all that. But I wanted to bring her on here and just share our story with you guys to let you know why this is such an important part of our lives. So Metha, I am glad you agreed to join me here. You're looking great.
Thanks, babe.
Just a brief history so folks that may not know us can get caught up. We are a blended family. You and I both were married previously and had two children each from those marriages. You had a boy and a girl, and I had two sons. And one of the children that you had a rare genetic disorder, and that's who we're going to be talking about mostly today. But our oldest son in that blended family is 27 now and is autistic on the Asperger spectrum. So we'll be talking about him probably on another show. But so we have firsthand experience with being a special needs parent. We have firsthand experience of dealing with the doctors and the hospitals and the diagnosis and the ups and the downs and everything that goes into it. So that's why we're here to do this, is to just share our story. So if you would, baby, just to start us off, tell us about Noah's life. Noah was our son that had the genetic disorder. Kind of just let folks meet Noah and kind of tell a little bit about him to start off.
Noah was born in 2001, and when I had Noah, I did not realize at the time that there were any issues. Pretty soon thereafter, I did realize that there was some problems with Noah's development. He was not reaching any of his baby milestones.
Okay.
He was not wanting to hold his head up. He didn't want to try to roll over. He was not doing anything that a typical 3 or 4 month old child should be doing.
Okay.
So I took him to his pediatrician and discussed this with her, and she sent us to a neurologist that scheduled him for an MRI. And the results of that MRI changed our lives. We realized through that Noah's brain was severely underdeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that he was going to struggle all of his life. We went at that point to a geneticist to have genetic testing run, and they were not able to find any answers. Developmentally delayed was the only thing that we had at that time. And
He was roughly how old at that point?
he was maybe 6 months old then.
Okay. Okay.
And so we started in with Alabama's early intervention programs, getting therapies, anything we could to help him with his development. He did not crawl until he was 2 years old. He didn't walk until he was 3. And at the age of 5, when it was time to start school, they have to be in a school system, the whole no kid left behind thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed a diagnosis, an official diagnosis.
Okay.
Without it, they would label him just as mentally retarded.
Okay.
But for some reason, school had to have a diagnosis. So I called the geneticist again at this point, it'd been 5 years, and asked, was there any way that we could get him retested? And they were absolutely glad to do that there had been significant advances in testing over that past 5 years.
Sure.
So we took him back, and that time we did get a diagnosis. It is a very rare condition, so it doesn't have a clinical name. It's
Mm-hmm.
only called XQ28 duplication. And basically that means number 28 gene on the X chromosome is duplicated. Because it was on the X chromosome, we know that it was on the female chromosome that he had. So
Okay.
it came from the mother's side of the family. So they tested me and found out that I was a carrier of this genetic abnormality, and I had no idea. There was no history in my family. So it was a complete shock to us.
So apparently your mother would have had this as well.
Well, we didn't know that at the time. It could have started with me. Um, they did not we couldn't go back any further to test because mother passed
Yeah.
away when she was 40. Um,
Yeah.
So they looked to go out on the family tree, which would have been my sister. However,
Mm-hmm.
she already had her 2 children. She was finished having kids, and they were healthy. Um, so they did advise that once my daughter Kaylee, which was 3 years older than Noah,
Mm-hmm.
once she was able, that she needed to be tested to see if she was a carrier, and also advised that my niece Montana be tested as well.
Okay.
They had to wait until they were 18 years of age to be tested
By
because
law. Yeah.
by law they had to be old enough to consent. And
Mm-hmm.
so Montana reached that age before Kaylee, um, and we found out that she was also a carrier. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she had well, at the time, actually, when we found out she was a carrier, she was pregnant, and she had a son. So thankfully, she did not pass that on to him, and she has
Mm-hmm.
since had another one. And she didn't pass that gene to either of her boys.
Okay.
But however, since Montana tested positive, then we know that my sister, her mother, Kim, had to be positive as well.
Right.
Um, so for Kim and I both to be positive, that means that my mother had to have had it as well.
Right.
Even got a healthy brother. It just never presented itself until Noah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kaylee, once she was of age, tested positive as well. Um,
Right.
and maybe another podcast we'll go into now. My grandson has the same genetic disorder.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That's a totally separate deal because he's got his own thing going on.
right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Noah got his diagnosis. He started school, and we had our health challenges, and the genetic disorder, like I said, his brain's severely underdeveloped, so he's way behind. He was in diapers his entire life. The main thing with this, he struggled with lung issues, and he aspirated a lot, and so we had a lot of complications from that, and we were in and out of the hospital quite frequently.
Right.
Then I guess the only thing at the time of his diagnosis that he was not experiencing that a child with that abnormality typically had was seizures.
Right.
And but at the age of about 9, he started having seizures. And
Yeah, I remember when those started because I was in the picture by then.
yes,
And
picture by then.
one that really stands out in my mind, we were at the breakfast table getting the kids ready for school. He was sitting at the breakfast table, and all of a sudden his head just dropped and hit the table. And we thought, well, he's not awake yet. That was we didn't know what else to think. We didn't know. And it was a short
such thing as a drop seizure. I didn't know that.
And thankfully, the school nurse, he had some episodes at school, and the school nurse noticed it. And she was the one that actually told us what was going on.
She is. She called me one day from school and asked me had I noticed Noah having seizures, and I told her that I had not seen any. And she said, "Have you noticed his head dropping?" And I said, "Yeah, I have." And she said he was having a drop seizure, as they called it, a drop seizure. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of a drop seizure.
Right.
So we got him an appointment with a neurologist, and they, of course, did the EEG. And at the time, the very first EEG, that neurologist came back and said, there is some seizure activity. However, it's not incredibly active. And somehow we went from that to 6 months later, his seizures had gotten to the point of the EEG being called volatile. And he had multiple seizures a day. And he was then diagnosed with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which is a very aggressive, progressive seizure disorder. And
very similar to like epileptic type seizures.
Yeah, and the seizures at that point, they told us that they could never stop them. They might be able to slow them down somewhat with medication, but they would never stop, and they would only get worse, and they were right.
Yeah.
And that's when we really noticed Noah's health going downhill. And the aspirations got worse, the hospital stays got worse. And by the time, he was 12 years old, maybe.
Yeah.
He was homebound. He was homebound and in his bed and not able to walk. He couldn't eat by this point. It was just really heartbreaking as a parent to see that. And he passed away at 13 years old. He was 5 days away from turning 14 when all the health complications took their toll, and his lungs would not stay inflated anymore. And we knew that was coming. The doctors had told us over the years that it was coming, but you never get truly prepared to say goodbye to your child.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, Exceptional Stories family. We've got something very exciting to share. We want to put the spotlight on you. If you're a special needs parent or caregiver, we want to hear your questions for an upcoming Q&A episode.
Send in your questions via email to exceptionalstoriespodcast@gmail.com or leave us a 90-second voice message at speakpipe.com/exceptionalstoriespodcast. We're diving deep into the most common pain points faced by special needs parents, and your input will shape this crucial conversation. I can't wait to hear from you. Let's make this Q&A episode truly exceptional.
It took a toll on us. It took its toll on his siblings. There was 3 other kids in the mix at that point, and
Yeah.
each one of them grieved differently. Each one of them processed that differently, and even to this day, all of them are in their mid to late 20s, and they still, none of the 3 are grieving the same. They still
That's
grieve
right.
because everybody loved him, and the more you love them, the more you grieve. But
Yes.
all the kids are grieve different. You and I grieve differently. You needed different things than I needed. We were both grieving over the same loss,
That's right.
but my grief was different than yours. And I don't think it was because he wasn't my blood son. The greatest compliment I ever received was after he passed away, people finding out that he was legally my stepson, but saying that they couldn't tell the difference because I treated him. They couldn't tell any difference by the way that I treated him. And that was the biggest compliment that I could get as a dad. But that particular time, it's a tough time to go through in and of itself. And
That's
then
right.
you add all the different dynamics into it. It is definitely a terrible time to have to go through. But that was 2015, 8 years ago, as of June of this year, and May. That's right. June's our anniversary. That's what I was thinking about. May of 2015 is when he passed. And 8 years ago, that night, there's no way we would have thought we would ever be able to talk about it. We would be able to share that story. Our world as we knew it changed drastically. And but look how far we've come. Look how far our faith has brought us. Friends that we met during this time that stood by us and stood up for us when we couldn't do it ourselves. And just um, um, a sad time to go through, but yet we were blessed to be able to go through it like we did.
I have often over the years, even before Noah passed, when I would give my testimony in places, I always entitled it, What Did I Do to Deserve This? And I tell my story, how it started when I found out Noah's condition. There was another baby in our church that was 5 months to the day younger than Noah. And it hurt my heart so bad because by the time that baby was born was when we were finding out that there was issues with Noah.
Yeah.
And I'm about to cry thinking about it. And I could not even hold that child. And I tried so hard to be happy for them, and I was happy for them. I didn't want anybody else to deal with what I was going through.
Yeah.
But it was just hard as a parent thinking, what did I do to deserve this? I know I've got, everybody has a past, and I tried to come up with every reason that I could think of that the Lord was punishing me for. It took some time, but I finally got to the point that the Lord let me know that I am not punishing you. I am blessing you. And I chose you to be Noah's mother because I trust you to be. So my mindset changed from saying, what did I do to deserve this? And anger and frustration and pity to what did I do to deserve this huge blessing? What did I do to deserve the Lord's trust of this magnitude? what did I do to deserve the love that I got from being Noah's mother? And
Right.
so it's the
Yeah.
same question, but you can say it and ask it in two different ways. And that's how my testimony is, because it started from the negative and went to the positive. And
Yeah.
without the Lord in my life, I don't think I could have ever, I don't know that I could have ever done that, and realized that.
Would want to do it without it.
But I know there's no way that we would have
No.
survived the last 8 years
No.
without the Lord and prayer
No
and our
way.
friends.
No
And
way.
no way. And, we have often said that one thing that we're proud of with all of our kids is the way that they have such a tender heart for
Yeah.
special needs kids, because they were raised with Noah and they loved him so much that they were always the very first to stand up for any of the kids
Right.
in school that were different, and would, you know, take a punch for one if it took it.
Right.
They were the first to call anybody out that was mistreating one.
They were the loudest and biggest defenders.
Absolutely, and I was so proud of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break right here, and when we come back, I want to touch on that just a little bit more, and then I've got one final question that I think we can put a bow on this for now. But stay with us. We'll be back here in just a few minutes with exceptional stories and the people who live them. I do hope you're enjoying this week's episode of Exceptional Stories and the People Who Live Them. If you would like to support our podcast to help it improve and be heard around the world, we have created a way that you can do just that. Go to the podcast website at exceptionalstoriespodcast.com and click the support button on the homepage. For as little as $3 per month, you can help keep the podcast available. There will be no pressure, and you can stop anytime you choose. So go to the show website now at exceptionalstoriespodcast.com and click the support button now to help. And now, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back with Exceptional Stories and the People Who Live Them. I'm your host, Steve Dover. This is episode 1, and we are laying the foundation for this podcast. And to do that, I have my wife visiting with me today, Metha, and we're telling our story about our up and down struggle in life with being the parents of 2 special needs children. We're focusing on one today. We'll do another one probably in another podcast. But right before we went to break, baby, you were talking about our kids being defenders. And I think their life with Noah caused them to be that, because they saw the struggle from our side. They saw the unfairness, or whatever you want to call it, from our side, and it made them be a defender and stand up for those special needs kids at school. And that is where they're different than me. My part of the story is I grew up an only child, and all of my time growing up, I only remember one person in our neighborhood. That's back when everybody knew their neighbors and knew who lived 2 or 3 streets over, and you just knew everybody. I only remember one person in our complete subdivision that would be characterized as special needs. And it was a guy named Gene. He was several years older than me. He was probably 20 years older than me. Had Down syndrome. Didn't know what his situation was at the time. I was too young. But I do remember that he looked different. He acted different. I was even told to stay away from him because he didn't know how strong he was. That was just the mentality back then. And all the kids in the neighborhood picked on him. So me wanting to be liked and fit into all the kids in the neighborhood, I pick on the Gene wagon, and spent a lot of my late teen years and early adult years being the person that made fun of people like that. And I probably would still be today had it not been for you coming into my life and bringing Noah into our lives and me getting to see firsthand of what it's really like. And I guarantee you, it didn't take me long to figure out that I was wrong and that I needed to change my ways. And you've heard me say this before. I mean, this is, I'm not revealing anything to you. We've had this discussion several times, but
Right.
um, but seeing Noah and loving him and having to deal with the good and the bad that comes along with this assignment, I guess you call it, made me one of the biggest defenders of special needs kids and the parents of those kids as well. One thing I did want to ask you before we get out of here. Um, let's see, how do I want to word this? What do you think? Well, let me ask you this. What are some things you learned along the way in dealing with Noah that made you a better person? I just told what made me a better person because of my exposure and my dealing with that. What are some things here in the last few minutes of our interview that Noah taught you that you still use today in dealing with people and your everyday life?
Um, Believe it or not, I've learned to be a little more patient. You've always called me Little Miss No Fuse for a reason. Um,
Well, it's true. It's
well,
better, but when we first got together, buddy, there was no fuse, and
that's
it was
it didn't take much to light it and set it off,
no,
but
it didn't.
definitely have more patience with situations as a whole.
Hmm.
Um, I had to learn how to be an advocate. I had to learn how to deal with all the doctors and fight for everything that Noah needed. And I just learned how to not give up. I persevered. And, if I got a no on one call, I would call another one. I didn't quit until I got Noah what Noah needed.
Hmm.
Um, I learned how to not give up. Um, and, we have always said that Noah's quality of life meant more than quantity.
Right.
Um, we had to learn a lot of things over the years to take care of him, and I was his full-time caregiver. Um, he had a feeding tube. He ended up with a trachea. He, you know, several things. I had to learn how to cath him. I had to learn how to do a lot of different things that I never dreamed that I would learn how to do. Um,
On your own child, no less, too.
Absolutely. But those are things you do because you love them.
Right.
And no telling how many times I've heard this said. It takes a special person to be the parent of a special child.
It does.
And I don't know how you do what you do. Well, I did what I had to do. I didn't have a choice.
Right.
And if the Lord chose you for that role, then he would equip you as well.
Right.
He did he didn't call me because I knew what I was doing. He called me because he trusted me and knew that I would do what I had to do. And
I agree with that
so
100%.
so I think that that's another important thing that that I've learned. And like you said in the beginning, it takes it. We were very fortunate to have a support system, and
Yes, very much so.
support systems are so important um, for the parents of special needs kids. It gets lonely.
It very much so.
it gets,
So I think some of our loneliest times were not necessarily when we were together here at the house dealing with whatever. It was when we were apart, when you were with him at the hospital.
yes,
And if Noah went to the hospital, he was there at least for a week, usually 2 weeks.
most of the was at least 2.
Yeah. And we still had 3 kids at home. So she was Noah's caregiver, Noah's advisor, advocate at the hospital. And I had to jump into the role of
Single parent.
single, daddy and mom or whatever the title is. I had to get kids bathed and do homework and cook meals and get them to work and get them to school. And I still had to work myself, still working a full-time job. So
Yeah.
that was what worked for us. Now, my daddy heart wanted to be right there at the hospital 100% of the time. And when I was able to be there, I was there. But to make this work, we had to divide and conquer. You had to conquer the hospital, and I had to keep the house running.
Right.
And that worked for us. But I think that was some of the loneliest times was when, and the hospital was only 62 miles away from the house. It's not like you were on the other side of the earth, but you may as well have been
Right.
because this was before FaceTime and Zoom and all this stuff. All we had was a cell phone to call and talk back and forth. So yeah, those were some real lonely times.
Well, and not only that, being separated at the hospital, but I was very fortunate to have a bestie like Suzanne that um, was there
Yeah.
uh, as far as everyday life,
Hmm.
because it's hard to be friends with a special needs parent when they can't go and do what you want to do.
Yeah, their schedule is not near as flexible.
That yeah, our schedule is not as flexible. Just going to the store, it's not as easy as just throwing a kid in the car seat and going and having a good day.
Sure.
But Suzanne made sure that I was not alone.
Hmm.
On those days that you had to work, and she was off on a Friday, she'd come over and we'd put Noah in his wheelchair and we'd have bestie day. We'd take him with
Yeah.
us. And much to his dismay, he would see her walk in and he would roll his eyes like, oh boy, she's back.
She's back. He knew what that meant, didn't he?
Right. But,
Yeah.
I was thankful for that. And I have often used the parable of the story in the Bible comparing the situation of Moses, and it's in Exodus, and when they were fighting, and he got tired, the Aaron and Hur was on either side holding his arms up, and as long as his arms were raised, they were victorious.
Yeah.
And when he got tired and his arms started coming down, they started losing the fight. So they raised his arms back up and he was victorious again. So I have used that story to explain how you and Suzanne were to me. Uh, because without you on one side holding an arm and Suzanne on the other side holding an arm up, I would have never survived it. Um, I just, there's no way I could have without y'all there for me and the Lord um, loving me through it and being patient with me. And especially there towards the end and after he'd passed, I tried so hard not to have a bitter heart.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever really did, because I was just so thankful that I had almost 14 years with him. And I gave him over to the Lord long before he passed, because I knew that if the Lord wanted to, he could have healed Noah here.
Sure.
But ultimately, not that I didn't feel like that he could, but we say, I'm a realist, and I knew that realistically Noah's healing was going to be in heaven. And so I was thankful that we had the final days with him. We brought him home from the hospital on hospice, and he was at home for the last week, and was able to really just love on him. And, we knew the time was drawing short, and so I was able to just love and tell him all the things I wanted to tell him. And I was there when he took his first breath, and I was holding him when he took his last.
Right.
And I'm very thankful for those memories.
And everything in between is called life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we've dropped a lot of nuggets today that I want to pick up along the way on this podcast. Maybe we can do some more, just focusing on certain aspects of maybe the grief process or what that final time, whatever. We'll put that together as the show goes. But thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast today and sharing just a little bit of our story. We just brushed the surface in the time that we have.
Absolutely.
But if there's some folks out there that are listening to this, and you are the parent of a special needs child, or the parent of a special needs child that is struggling, and every one of them struggles. I don't mean to say that lightly, but if they want somebody to reach out to, they can email us here at the podcast at exceptionalstoriespodcast@gmail.com, and I'll have that in the show notes for you to click on. But just if they need some resources, or they need some help, just need an ear to listen to, whatever, we want to be there and be that for them, because there were so many people that were there for us.
I would love nothing more than to be able to be there for somebody else.
And I think that's why we're here at this time right now. But you made it the whole time. You did good.
Thank you.
And you're still my number one. You're still my favorite grown-up person. And I hope that somebody out there will hear this and be able to grow from it and reach out to us. And we'll just do this thing called life. But thank you, baby. I'll see you here in a little bit.
Okay.
Before we go, I want to thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If you are the parent of a special needs child and wish to share your story with us, or if you know someone we should talk with on the show, please send an email to exceptionalstoriespodcast@gmail.com. If you've been enjoying our show, we would love to hear your feedback. If you could, take a minute, leave us a 5-star rating on your preferred podcast platform. It would really mean the world to us if you did. Your rating helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you quality content. I also want to invite you to follow us on our social media pages. You can find us on both Facebook and on Instagram at Exceptional Stories Podcast. Lastly, if you found this podcast informative and would like to keep it going, go to our webpage at www.exceptionalstoriespodcast.com and click on the support button on our homepage. For as little as $3 a month, you can play an active role in making sure these stories are heard. Thank you for choosing to spend your precious time with us today. Remember, you're not alone. Together, we will create a world that will embrace and support every exceptional story. Until next week, be blessed.